Hey everybody, it's Kiwi here. We're doing something a little bit different today. As you guys know, I've made a couple videos playing VGC online, and it's been really enjoyable, and so I've been keeping up with it. And just recently, they announced the new regulation set starting, I believe, next month. Yes, Regulation Set H. I'm going to be honest, this definitely caught me as a surprise, just its rule set. I was very confident that we were going to be moving into a 2 legendary Pokemon format, but instead we're doing the opposite, where we're going back to no legendary Pokemon. It's also kind of interesting though that it's not just the legendary Pokemon that are going away. We're also losing the Paradox Pokemon, which I think is going to be very interesting because ever since the Paradox Pokemon were made legal, the entire format has been dominated by Fluttermane. Well, maybe not dominated, but Fluttermane's been a pretty big deal. So I thought it would be kind of interesting if we went over the Pokemon from Regulation Set G, and we could just talk about how things are going to be different moving forward. Alright, so right off the bat, the number one pick we're using Pika Analytics for the data, obviously, is Urshifu Rapid Strike. Given that this thing is a legendary Pokemon, we can assume it's going to be going away, which I am very, very, very excited for. This side has a lot of ads. Urshifu has been completely dominating the metagame ever since it came out back in Sword and Shield and the Isle of Armor, so knowing that this thing is going to be finally not legal again is very exciting. I think it's definitely worth noting that Rillaboom and Incineroar, two Pokemon that are very popular, according to this, are the two most used Pokemon right now, not counting Urshifu. These guys are going to go crazy, especially Incineroar. I mean, at this point now, it's like, there's going to be nothing to stop Incineroar, because Incineroar's main check was Urshifu Rapid Strike. And now that Urshifu Rapid Strike is gone, it's going to be running all over the place. I'd say Raging Bolt was another really good counter to it, but again, that's going to be gone as well. I think Rillaboom... God, there are so many ads on this site! I do think it's worth noting, though, that I think Rillaboom is going to be also just as good, just as broken as Incineroar is going to be. He was a pretty good counter to Urshifu, but a lot of the other Pokemon running around were really good against it. Tornadus was fantastic against it, certain forms of Ogerpon, Fluttermane, Calyrex Ice, if it got the Trick Room off, that was a pain. Raging Bolt, another very popular Pokemon in the current format, that's going away soon, but I'm okay with that one. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that Raging Bolt is the bane of my existence, so I am more than happy to see this guy go away. But I am very curious to see what it's going to do for the metagame, because Raging Bolt he is all over the place. Because Raging Bolt plus Miraidon was some of the most, if not the most powerful priority in the entire game. So not having to deal with Thunderclap anymore is going to be really nice going forward. I am a little sad to see Ogerpon go, just because Ogerpon is one of my favorite Pokemon ever. If you played the DLC, you know that this Pokemon is just an absolute charm. She's adorable. It's just a great character, honestly. So I just love using her on my team, and it does help that it's just a really good Pokemon in general. So I am kind of sad to see it go. I think Tornadus is a very interesting thing to talk about, because Tornadus is by far the best prankster user in the format right now, and by a decent wide margin, because the only two other notable prankster support Pokemon, I would say, are Whimsicott and Murkrow. So it's going to be interesting to see which one of those Pokemon kind of becomes more popular now that Tornadus is no longer legal. Personally, I'm going to assume that Whimsicott becomes more popular than Murkrow. Although, I do think there is a case for Murkrow, because with Whimsicott, I feel like it can be shut down pretty hard by the Incineroar, which is going to be easily the #1 ranked Pokemon, I think, going forward. I mean, one Flare Blitz is gonna... That's gonna hurt. That's gonna hurt a lot. It does have that Fairy type going for it, but that's still only gonna hit Incineroar neutral. So I do think it's worth noting that Murkrow with Eviolite is probably just gonna be bulkier, and it is probably gonna do better against that Incineroar going forward. Fergaraf, I think, is another pretty interesting take. I think this Pokemon's probably going to go down in usage, just because I think... Well, actually, no, I'm going to actually take that back. Because right now, the most popular Trick Room Pokemon in the format is currently Calyrex Ice Rider. Because Calyrex Ice Rider under Trick Room is an absolute monster. Its defenses are insane: 150 physical defense, 130 special defense, and its attack set of 165 with Glacial Lance. I mean, not many things are surviving that, and even if they do survive it, it's pretty unlikely they're going to take this thing out in one hit. So by far, it's definitely one of the best Trick Room Pokemon in the format right now. But I know before the Legendary started running around, we saw a lot of other Trick Room Pokemon like Ursaluna running around a lot. So I do think it's possible that now that the Legendaries are out of the picture again, we could see Ursaluna become popular again, paired up with Fergaraf. Because Fergaraf is a really good partner to Ursaluna. A, can set up the Trick Room, and B, it can do the Helping Hand. I am interested to see which Ursaluna does end up being more popular in the format. I do think it's worth noting that in the promotional art, they show Ursaluna Blood Moon, so I think Game Freak might be anticipating that Ursaluna Blood Moon becomes a very popular Pokemon, as well as Dragonite from the looks of it. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Dragonite had a comeback going forward, because Dragonite was one of the most popular Pokemon in early formats. That Terra Normal Extreme Speed did hit like an absolute truck. Unfortunately, I would love it, but unfortunately, Amoonguss is not one of the banned Pokemon. I mean, right now it's still a pretty popular Pokemon in the current format, but I could see it definitely becoming more popular in the Regulation F, or not F, we haven't been in Regulation F in a while now, in the Regulation H format. I think it's going to be a pretty decent counter to things like Incineroar, even though it is weak to fire. Being able to sleep that Incineroar means it's not going to be able to just spam parting shots every 5 seconds, which is going to be nice. Not to mention, it's just a really solid, bulky mon. I don't really think there's a lot to say about NDDF, if we're being honest. I know NDDF was really popular back in the day. I mean, it still is really popular. I mean, Regulation G, it's still top 15, which I still think is very noticeable. But especially back in the day, it was a very popular set within DDF that involved using Armor Rouge to spam Expanding Force. It was a really scummy set that most people hated playing against, if I remember correctly. I could definitely see something like that coming back, but I could also see it just being another Trick Room support mon to support the Ursaluna if for some reason you didn't want to use Fergaraf. But I think Fergaraf is going to just be a very solid Pokemon in the format. Because Rillaboom is easily going to be the #2 Pokemon in the format. And it's going to be spamming things like Grassy Glide, so having Armor Tail is going to be really useful. And since I'm definitely expecting Dragonite to make like a reappearance in the format, I think it's going to be really good against shutting down that extreme speed spam. I definitely see for Regrep, it's going to be a very useful Pokemon going forward. I could easily see it being a top 5 Pokemon just for its sheer utility alone. It's also going to be our first format in a while that's not going to have the Treasures of Ruin in play, which is going to be very interesting. I mean, none of the treasures are really super common except for maybe Qian Pao and Chi Yu. I definitely see a lot more Qian Pao, and it's actually lower on this list than I would have expected. Because this was a great partner, especially for Dragonite back in the day. Being able to lower everything's defense on the field, this thing was an absolute support monster back in the day, and it still hits like a truck itself. But, I mean, Qian Pao, Chi Yu, the rest of them, none of them are going to be in the format going forward, so I think that's going to be very interesting. Honestly, I'm really excited for this format because it's going to be very similar to Regulation A and Regulation B, if I remember correctly, because I don't think any of like the Paradox Pokemon or Legendary Pokemon were allowed in those formats, if I'm remembering correctly. But now we're going to have a lot of the Pokemon that were introduced in the Teal Mask and the Indigo Disc. So I think it's going to be really interesting. If I remember correctly, I don't think there was ever a format with Ursaluna where there weren't legendaries and Paradox Pokemon running around. Not the super broken legendaries, but you know, a lot of still the really good legendaries like Urshifu, the Weather Trio, the Weather Trio, the Weather Genies, whatever you want to call them. That being said, I don't see Weather being super popular in this format going forward. I feel like if any Weather is going to be popular, it's probably going to be Rain. Just because Pelipper's it's a very solid setup mon. But there really aren't a ton of super popular Water-type Pokemon that are going to still be legal in this format. Of course, as soon as I said that, I immediately remembered Dondozo is a thing. For all of you who weren't around back in early Scarlet and Violet, Dondozo was a very popular mon. It was basically one of the best tanks in the whole game. I mean, it's still a pretty decent mon, but it's definitely fallen off in usage, thanks to all the legendaries and everything. Because there's two really good sets with Dondozo. You can either do the Commander with Tatsugiri, but honestly, even without it, its ability is really good because it has Unaware. So any kind of like setup is going to be really good. That being said, I don't remember what setup moves this gets, if any, besides Substitute, but I'm not really sure if you would categorize that as setup. But still, it's a very good Pokemon overall. It's a very good tank. But speaking of Water-type Pokemon, that reminds me. Palafin is a Pokemon I'm very interested to see how he responds to the new meta going forward. Because Palafin was one of those Pokemon that early Scarlet and Violet, he was very popular before he did eventually kind of fall off. Can I pull up his tournament usage data? I can, except oh, there it is. Tournament usage. Apparently, he was in 16% of tournaments. I definitely believe that, especially early on. He was a very popular mon, and I think with the legendaries gone again, like especially Urshifu Rapid Strike being gone, I think there's going to be a very strong case for Palafin to come back. If you put this on a rain team with Pelipper, I think it could be a very strong mon in a new format. Or even if you just wanted to go for a Water, Fire, Grass core, I think Palafin it's going to be one of the best Pokemon for that core, I would argue. Just because there aren't a lot of other super strong water types in the format besides Dondozo. I think another really popular Pokemon that we could see showing up a lot is Annihilate. Because right now, again, Urshifu, both forms of Urshifu are the most popular fighting type Pokemon in the format. But I think Annihilate could be a really good contender to be popular. I think it could be a really good check for Incineroar. Because it is going to have that fighting type stat, so it's going to be super effective against Incineroar. And as the game goes on, it's going to just keep getting stronger because of that Rage Fist. That Rage Fist is going to be resisted at first, but I feel like if it took enough chippies, I feel like this thing, it could do really good against Incineroar, even with the Intimidate. But even with the Intimidate, it still has other moves like Close Combat, Drain Punch. Like, it's not a hard counter to Incineroar, but I would argue that it's a check to Incineroar, and I think that's very important. If you wanted to make an argument for weather teams, I would definitely say it's worth talking about Archaludon. I feel like if you were making a rain team, more likely than not, you are going to include Archaludon going forward. Because if we think about it, besides maybe like Dragonite, I think Archaludon's probably going to be one of the best Dragon-type Pokemon in the format. I could definitely see... No, actually, no. I'm going to take back what I was going to say. I was going to say I could see Dragapult becoming popular in the format, but again, with Incineroar running around so much, I do think that's a pretty hard check for Dragapult. Not a hard counter, because Incineroar, I think the only attacking Dark-type move it usually runs is Snarl, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's not like it's going to be able to really hit Dragapult super effective. Oh, never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about. Incineroar is a Dark-type and has access to one of the best moves in the game, Knockoff. Yeah, unfortunately, with Incineroar so popular, I just can't see Dragapult being very popular. But I think that's why Archaludon could be so good in this format going forward. Like, it's not going to be super walled by Incineroar, because it is a special attacker, and it's going to be neutral to its Fire-type stab. And it is decently bulky, so that knockoff, it'll be annoying, but it's honestly going to benefit it because it has that stamina ability. So I think Archaludon, especially in the rain, could be a really good check for Incineroar. I know Torkoal is a thing, but I don't really see Sun teams being super popular in Regulation H. I mean, you have Pokemon like Volcarona, Incineroar, and maybe like a Chlorophyll Pokemon. I mean, Venusaur is legal again thanks to the Indigo Disc. So I could see maybe like a Chlorophyll Venusaur set being popular, but overall I definitely don't think Sun teams are going to be as popular as Rain teams in the current format. I think when Koraidon was legal, I think that was probably when Sun teams were going to peak, just because Koraidon is just such a good mon. Even Groudon too. I mean, Groudon and Koraidon are definitely the most powerful Sun setters in the whole game. And they're definitely some of the ones that can take the biggest advantage of it. With the legendaries and the Paradox Pokemon gone, I can say for pretty confidently that I think we're going to see Ditto fall off a decent bit. I don't think there's really going to be a reason to run Ditto going forward. Just because typically when you run Ditto, it's because you're running it for the intention of being able to copy one of your opponent's legendary mon. But since there aren't going to be any legendary mon, I don't think it's really going to be a super strong case for Ditto going forward. So he's already not a super popular pick, but I think he's going to be basically non-existent in the format going forward. King Gambit, I'm honestly surprised he's as low as he is, because King Gambit is a super fantastic Pokemon, super strong, and I think he's definitely going to be very popular going forward. Besides Incineroar and its Flare Blitz, I don't think there's going to be a ton of hard counters to him, just because there aren't like a ton of super popular fighting types once Urshifu's gone, because Urshifu is definitely one of like the biggest counters to this thing right now, because it's quad weak to its fighting type attacks. But yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited for in the Regulation Set H is just to see how the Teal Mask and Indigo Disc Pokemon work in a non-legendary metagame and a non-Paradox Pokemon metagame. I couldn't think of the word. I could not think of the word Paradox to save my life. But I'm really excited to have these mons out of the format for a while, just because. Not even counting the restricted mons, it has felt like that the metagame has been very strongly dominated by these legendary and paradox mods. I mean, out of the top 10, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 out of the top 10 Pokemon are a combination of legendary and paradox Pokemon. Granted, that does include 2 restricted Pokemon, but even still. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised Fluttermane is as low on here as it is. That being said, I'm not exactly sure which one I'm looking at, but that's fine. But I'm definitely excited. I think the thing I'm most excited about is that Urshifu is going to be gone. But the biggest problem with Urshifu being gone is I think that Urshifu, especially Urshifu Rapid Strike, was an amazing check to Incineroar. And now there's not really going to be anything that's going to be checking that Incineroar a lot. And I genuinely think it's just going to be running absolutely rampant going forward. It's easily going to be on probably like 75-80% of all teams. I probably won't run it personally just because I don't like this thing. I love his design and I love that he's a good Pokemon, but the fact that he's everywhere, it literally drives me crazy. So I'm kind of sick of Incineroar. I'm definitely gonna have to work on new team comps because a lot of my teams do have a lot of the Pokemon that are gonna be made illegal. Ogerpon, Tornadus, I think those are, or even Urshifu. I hate Urshifu, but I use them on half my teams. Same with Fluttermane. That's 4 Pokemon right there that are on so many teams, and none of them are going to be legal going forward. So I think team building in the future is going to be very interesting. But the Regulation H isn't going to start for almost another month, so we still have another month of Regulation G. And as everybody knows, Regulation H isn't going to be permanent. I believe at the beginning of next year, they're actually going back to Regulation G, which I think is going to be pretty interesting. I would have expected them to go on to Regulation, whatever comes after H, I think, Regulation I, and do a 2 legendary format, but they'll probably do that after the next round of Regulation G. They'll probably do a 2 legendary format in time for Worlds 2025, but that's just my prediction. That being said, I don't know how many more years we have of Scarlet and Violet. I know we're getting Legends ZA next year, but I don't think that's going to be the next competitive scene. But, I mean, we'll find out. But, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this different type of video. I know it's not what I usually do. It was very unscripted, very casual. Just giving my general thoughts on what we can maybe expect from the metagame coming forward. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this kind of content, let me know. I'm more than happy to do this kind of content. It was actually really enjoyable. Yeah. But until next time, this has been your favorite fruit, Kiwi. I'll talk to you later, friends.